In order to make your graphs in Apple numbers, you're going to need to first add a blank spreadsheet by hitting the plus button. You're going to select blank spreadsheet. For this graph, we're not going to use column A, so if you tap on the A, it'll select the whole column and you could delete that column. Next, you're going to want to insert or type in your data, and you want to make sure that the labels are in the gray header row, and then your numbers are all in white cells with no units. Note we have the units in the header rows, or the headers, and not the actual data portion of the data table. That way it can be graphed. Next, we want to format our data table in such a way that it looks nice. So we can take our handlebar at the top right and we can decrease the amount of columns we have. We could scroll to the bottom and take the handlebar and decrease the amount of rows we have so that the data table is nice and organized. We could change the label on our data table. In this case, this is for finding absolute zero. And we're actually going to want to do two different graphs. So I'm going to add two more columns. I'm going to copy and paste my volume data into the fourth column because that's going to stay the same. And then I'm going to have another column for temperature. So I could take that label, copy and paste it. And I'm going to we're changing the units on that to Kelvin. We're going to calculate that. So I'm going to type in my K to show that I'm using units of Kelvin. Rather than adding 273.15 to each of my degrees Celsius with the calculator and then typing it in, what I could do is I could double tap to type into that cell. And using numbers or Microsoft Excel or a similar program, once I hit equals, that tells the program that I'm going to type in a formula. So I want to reference the degrees Celsius temperature by clicking on cell A2. It then shows up with a tag for A2. And I want to tell the program that I want to add, so I'm going to add 273.15 because that's how you convert between Celsius and Kelvin. And once I'm ready, I'm going to hit the green check mark, which will then automatically calculate that new temperature for me. I don't want to have to type that into all of these cells. And so what I could do is I could select the cell that already has the formula input into it. I could tap it again, go to Cell Actions, and then I'm going to select Autofill Cells. It turns gold, and I could just drag that down, and it will automatically adjust that calculation for each row. So if I click through these, I could see that it is using, so this one is using cell A3 and adding 273.15. This is using cell A4, cell A5, and A6. So as I automatically drag that down, it adjusted the formula for me. A lot of people like to make this look better by centering all of the data. So I could select everything in there, go to my Format Paintbrush tool, go to Cells, and hit Center Alignment. So the table looks a little bit nicer. And so now I'm ready to insert my graphs. To insert my first graph, I want to select all of the data for temperature, degrees Celsius, and volume in milliliters. I want to make a graph of volume versus temperature. Volume on the y-axis, temperature on the x-axis. Because I have my temperature and volume next to each other, it defaults to the format X on the left, Y on the right. So it's already input the way I need it. So I selected my data. I'm going to hit the plus sign, the add button, go to the graphs tab, scroll down to find my scatter plot, which is the one with the plus signs, and I'm going to select that. I'm going to do the same graph for my Kelvin data. And I'm going to add, same thing, scatter plot. Perfect. So I could drag this second one next to it or wherever I need it to be. So it's nicely aligned, change my zoom level so I can kind of see what I'm doing. I'm done looking at the data table at this point. I'm just going to be formatting these graphs. So I want to format these both the same. The one on the left is the degrees Celsius data. So I'm going to select the graph by clicking on it. I'm going to go to my Format Paintbrush. I want to turn the legend off. I want to turn the title on. And I'm also going to add in axes labels. So I'm going to go to Style, and then below Style, mine's already on labels, but I can go through General, Grid Lines, and Labels. I want to be in Labels. I want to turn on my axis name for my value x-axis, and then my axis name for my y-axis. And you can see that those labels popped up on the graph. I'm going to do the same thing for the other graph. For my paintbrush, I'm going to go to the chart, turn the legend off, turn the title on, go to Style, Labels, turn both axes names on. So now I have those ready to change. So the one on my left, this is finding absolute zero using Celsius temperature. And on the right, I have the same thing, finding absolute zero, and this is using my Kelvin temperature. And so my titles are all done. I want to label my axes. So for both axes in both cases, it's going to be volume, and then my units were milliliters. Oh, I have my parentheses the wrong way there. And there we go. My x-axis for my Celsius graph is going to be temperature in Celsius. And just a reminder, to get the degree sign, I go into my numbers, hold down the 0, degree sign pops up. And that one's done. And then the one on the right, it is the same thing, temperature, but this time instead of Celsius, it's going to be in Kelvin. So looking at these graphs, they're properly labeled now. The whole point of this lab is to extrapolate this line. So if you look here, you can kind of follow the data points, and you'll see that if you were to extrapolate and have a trend line, it should cross about at the 0 temperature mark for when the volume is 0. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with this lab. We want to also find what Celsius temperature corresponds to a volume of 0. And so if we were to follow these data points back, we don't have enough, our graph isn't showing enough. So we want to expand our x-axis so that it goes to -300. So I selected my graph, I go to the Format Paintbrush. This time I want to go to Data, and I want to change my x-axis scale. So click on that, and it already has the minimum set to automatic. I want to manually put that in as 300, keep everything else the same, and now you can see that both those graphs look similar now. So the next thing I want to do is I want to add trend lines to these graphs so we could actually get equations for the trend line that would extrapolate to a volume of 0. So to do that, I click on the graph, I go to Format, Chart tab, scroll down where it says Trend Lines. Right now it says None. I want to change the trend line type to linear. When I go back, I'm in my trend line settings. I could change the color of that line. I'm going to just make mine red so it stands out on the blue dots. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to turn on my equation. So that equation that shows up on the graph is the equation for that trend line. I'm going to do the same thing for my Kelvin temperature. So Format, scroll down, Trend Lines. I want linear, go back to the settings, change the color, and then I want to change and add the equation, so I'm all set. And so now I have my data table, I have my graphs, I have the trend line, I have the equations. I am all set to screenshot these so I can put them in my lab report. So I'm just going to screenshot, and then I'm all set. That's it.